Let's do the last verse. What have I to fear? What have I? Leaning on the everlasting arms, I have blessed peace with my Lord so near. Leaning on the everlasting arms, leaning, safe and secure from all alarms. Leaning on the everlasting arms. Now let's pray. God, thank you for being a shoulder for us to lean on. Thank you for supporting and loving us, for drawing us close to you. We ask that as we study your word and as we consider our relationship with you, that you would help us to draw closer to you and to one another. We pray in your name. Amen. Welcome back. All right. Well, we are in chapter 4 in spirituality and the 12 steps. So this is about making a searching and fearless moral inventory for ourselves. So here is where, taking the first 3 steps in mind, we start to look at our shortcomings. So this, I wouldn't say, is a fun endeavor or necessarily something that we might want to do. I don't know if in this process of moral inventory, if we also look at good traits and characteristics. Has that been, Patty, has that been an experience for you in step 4? Is it just faults? Did I look at the word faults? It's a moral inventory. So is it both the good and the bad, or is it?
It's my understanding just to kind of get in touch with what I have always done is write down everything I can think of, and then when I went over it with somebody else, because they can be objective, they can help me decide. 6 and 7 are really looking at the assets and the defects.
Oh, okay.
So
Gotcha.
From my experience.
So this is kind of just a start.
Yeah, just kind of trying to look at everything and write down as much. I was always told to write down as much as I could think of, even if I didn't think it meant anything. Experiences that I went through, because if I remembered them, they meant something to me.
Right.
And I think it's more about seeing a pattern in how we react to things, how we adjust. Looking at how just the patterns we've made over the years and how we, react to things.
Okay.
I
guess I can understand the searching and fearless. So, that means don't be afraid. You're going to be okay. Just take a look at yourself. I guess the moral inventory part, I guess as we read, we'll kind of get more of a sense of what that would entail, because, morality is.
About that was trying to do a 4th step without thinking about a 5th step, because it's like, I can't tell somebody I did this, or I can't, just writing everything down, good or bad, and because it's like, no, I'm not
don't be aware.
Yes.
Don't be aware you're going to have to share that.
Yeah. You don't want to know that.
Yeah, some religious groups. There was a I'm not going to remember the name of it. It was a TV show series, had Aaron Paul in it from Breaking Bad, the younger guy, and it was about a cult that had some similarities to maybe Christian Science or something like that. But a big part of it was doing these interviews where you sat with somebody, and it was almost like a confessional, where you would, you'd say, these are all the things that I've done and experienced. You try to, like you said, you're trying to remember just about everything that you can, all the significant events, in your life, your thought patterns and behaviors and stuff like that. So in this show, they were recording these audio tapes, I guess, maybe some videotapes too, and they archived them. And then later on, as things move, when the organization of the commune found itself at a place where there was some compromise, there were some people leaving, there was questions about it, they end up using those things to blackmail people. Essentially,
Sure you
like,
wanna leave?
are you sure you want to leave, or are you sure you want to stop giving us money? That kind of a thing. So I can understand. It's not that it would play itself out in a drama like that, but I can understand if you were thinking that this may have some kind of an impact on me. It might make you rethink the fearlessness part and kind of be afraid to fully divulge.
I think also we tend to think, oh my gosh, I'm this horrible person. It's not about just like writing all the bad things down, it's about learning, and I just lost my train of thought when I raised my hand. I was going to tell you something.
Well, it's just about writing the bad things, but the good things.
Well, yeah, it's about everything.
There is a company that is doing that now, and I'm in the middle of doing it with my grandson. And now I'm scared. And you're saying, right, he's writing all this down for a memory thing. Okay, what about 2 and 3 generations from now when that book goes out? I'm telling him all kinds of things. Whoa, oh boy, that's scary.
Well, after a couple generations are passed, we're not going to really care what people think about us anymore, maybe, or maybe we do. I think I shared in Bible study that I found out about my great grandfather was a German immigrant. He was a successful manufacturer of matches and a coal distributor, and he had built up some money. He was also a German Baptist minister, and I was doing genealogy research. That's how I found out this stuff. I didn't find this stuff out from my grandma or my dad. They I don't know if she knew or she didn't tell. It was her dad's father. So yeah, I found a bunch of lawsuits that are in the archives where the church was suing him because apparently they gave him some money to pay off a mortgage and it didn't get to the bank.
Yeah.
And then he ended up having his body found in the river, floating in the river in New York. So that's how he died. And the newspaper article says that apparently he was struggling with mental health issues, or he was depressed or something like that. But it's like,
Yeah.
that's kind of weird that this lawsuit's happening just before somebody. But who knows? Who knows? So do we want to share ourselves fully?
No.
If we no, if we can make it through life, and we're kind of, I think we talked about this last week about the mask that we wear. So if we can make it through life just showing people the mask and not letting people see behind the mask, then maybe that is something that can be, that's how we are remembered, and that's how people know us. But
I just remembered.
oh, you just remembered. Bring it
Sorry.
before you forget. Quick.
I'm sorry. This is my life. But there's a thing, we're only as sick as our secrets. And that's kind of behind why we do that, because I know from my experience, so many things that you're afraid to share with somebody, or you don't want people to know because you present, a certain image wearing the masks. And then if they know this about me, or they'll think horrible things, or they won't like me, I won't be accepted. It's that people-pleasing thing too, so.
Right.
But
Well, with this, you're kind of realizing that it's because of the secrets, or it's because of me not coming to terms with certain things, that I might be experiencing these dysfunctional behaviors in my life, and it's impacting my relationships. So it's not done as the uncovering of those things has a positive purpose in doing it, and it's that ultimately your life is going to be better. Now, there's still an acknowledgement. We have to use the word fearless for a reason, because there is, between here and there, between where we are and where we want to be, there is stuff to go through, and that's where, being strong is something that's important. Scary, yeah. All right, so let's see if we can pick up where we left off here. I'm going to go to the top of this page. We're a couple paragraphs in. It's the last couple sentences before the paragraph that begins with "people only come to deeper consciousness." So before that it says, "Without confidence in a greater love," capital G, capital L, "none of us will have the courage." Let me make this a little bit bigger for you guys.
Thank you.
All right, let's see. Without confidence in a greater love, none of us will have the courage to go inside, nor should we. It merely becomes silly scrupulosity and not any mature development of consciousness or social awareness. All right, so we're looking inside, and before we look inside, we are kind of getting a sense this is going to be challenging. I'm going to need help doing this. This is where the greater love comes in. This is where the greater power, the greater love. God's with you. You're not alone. You can do this. That's kind of the way to move forward. And I'm sure a lot of people may stop at this point, because it takes trust in a greater power and trust in a greater love to do this. Now, trust doesn't just come fully and immediately. Trust is something that probably comes in stages. Maybe it comes maybe it comes more quickly in some relationships than in other relationships. But there is to be. It's not just a fearlessness, because you can be fearless and do stupid things, right? Remember No Fear? That was like a big slogan back in the 90s or whatever, and people are doing crazy things. Mm-hmm. So, but it is a fearlessness, a no fear that is accompanied with trust, because everything is going to be okay. That there's that strong conviction and kind of the leaning on the greater love.
I have a t-shirt that says, "Determination is that feeling you get just before you do something incredibly stupid."
Yeah. I'm sure people have gotten into step 4 and thought to themselves, this is really stupid. I can't believe I'm doing this. I wish I hadn't started. All right. So one of the things that we're doing when we're thinking of this, what we're looking at is ourselves in a moral sense. So it has to do with morality. Now here is where some of our differences may come into play, in that what we understand to be moral or right is going to have a little bit of a different flavor from person to person. There are definitely a lot of things that we, kind of foundational ideas that we probably agree on. But the morality of why I thought this way or why I did this thing, that's going to come into play. I was speaking with my son about he and his friends discussing this topic of lying. So is lying okay? And it's like, well, if you look at if you have somebody that grows up in an environment that's a very dangerous environment, a very violent environment, risky environment, survival becomes a necessity above living a good and whole life. So when you're living a life of survival, lying may become a necessity. It may become really the only way, because you can only speak the truth really in a situation of trust. I mean, if you're giving yourself over to speak the truth, we share the truth with people that we trust. Whereas if you're in a relationship that you cannot trust a person and be vulnerable with them, you don't want to give them some kind of an advantage to causing you harm or to taking advantage of you. So lying ends up becoming something that's just a natural thing. My dad doesn't watch the Bible study that much, so I'll share a story about him. But one of the things that he encountered is my stepmom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and as she was developing, and hers was rapid, and so she developed rapidly over a number of years. And when you're dealing with somebody who has Alzheimer's or dementia, their concept of reality and reality can be very different. So things like, I want to go home, is like, that's a simple request or a simple statement. It's like, wherever home is, take me there. So it's like, well, what is home? Is it the home that you grew up in Massachusetts? Is it the home that you lived in most of your adult life in Atlanta? Is it the home we have lived in now for a number of years in California? So a lot of times people will end up responding to somebody with Alzheimer's with lies, like little white lies or things like that. When you get into a pattern of lying to somebody where it's almost like as you're relating to this person, you're thinking on your feet creatively. You're like, I have to create this fiction to go along with this story that this person has going on in their head. So I may be telling the truth or not. You're probably at some point not even thinking about it. Well, living in California, us living in Michigan, Florida, other side of the state, I would talk to him occasionally and visit him sometimes. And my brothers and I started talking with one another, and we were finding that Dad was lying to us about stuff, that we were trying to get through moving her into a home and looking over finances, and kind of we're having to sort things out. And along the way, we don't remember Dad lying to us when we were growing up and as we knew him as adults, but after going through this situation of really living in a survival mode of like, I'm with another person 24/7 who's in another world, so I have to kind of play along with the fiction. So all of that to say, morality is not super easy to determine sometimes. So maybe that's one of the things that we encounter when we do a moral inventory, is we would have to ask ourselves, what was the context? If I'm taking a moral inventory of myself, I was behaving a certain way, I was saying certain things or doing certain things at this point in my life. What we might need to do also is kind of step back a little bit and remember the context of that situation. And I early on, I grabbed onto the belief that we have to understand God knows us better than we know ourselves. God knows our hearts. God knows our intentions. And God is not an outsider that doesn't know us, that is judging us based on these outward manifestations of words and behavior in life. God's looking deeper. Other people can't see our hearts, but this love, this greater love that we trust in, can see our hearts. So this might be helpful as we do the inventory to know God is going to help us to look deeply at our hearts in terms of why we did things. Now, along the way, what we might find is that we were engaging in thoughts and behaviors and actions that were, at the time, considering the circumstances, were okay to do and to say. Looking at my dad's situation, it was okay to lie. We understand that. The purpose of it was to bring a sense of peace and stability to another person. So the intention of the heart is to create a peaceful environment. And also you're thinking about yourself, because you're like, if I say the truth to this person, we're going to be fighting all day because our reality just doesn't match up, So looking at the heart, we may find that we were doing okay at the time. Now, we may come back later and say, however, this is not necessarily a behavior and a way of thinking and living that is going to be the best for you in the long term. Situationally, it might have been okay, but overall, it's really not the best thing to engage in. So, lying within a particular context, morally at the time it may have been good. If after mom has passed and dad is moving on with his life, it's going to be better if he switches out of the survival mindset and kind of puts the lying behind him, right?
That's so, I don't know, relieving, I guess, is a good word.
Okay.
Because when I think back to the things before Christian, if I think that's only what I knew then. You
Right.
know, that's how I knew to survive.
Right.
Things I did, I was in survival mode.
Exactly.
So it kind of takes the pressure off, and you go, "Whew, I'm not so bad."
Yeah,
You know, I'm different
it
now.
allows you to give compassion to that person and understand that person and say, actually, you did a pretty good job because you really wanted to continue your journey. You wanted to live. You wanted to, and you probably wanted good things for your life. And in the moments, the only way that you could see it is, it's almost like if somebody, it's almost like the difference between normal life and living in wartime. Or we could even put it into like, it's almost like normal life and living with COVID, So you can go through this season, years, wars can go on for years and pandemics can go on for years, it seems. And the survival that we're experiencing in our personal life can go on for years. And in order to survive war and make the best of it and come out on the other side as fully intact as possible, you are going to have to engage in a certain way of thinking and behaving that is going to be very different from life after that. So, it's...
You're gonna have to do things that you would never in a million years imagine yourself having to do, or even looking about going down that road.
Right. So you
it's
think
survival.
about survivors like veterans, survivors of combat.
Yeah.
In the moment, as you are fending for your life and the life of the people around you, as you're in this mode of I must kill in order to survive, when you come to outside of that and look back at yourself, oftentimes there's a lot of shame that people have to sort through.
A lot of the survivors. guilt.
And it's like, survivor's guilt too. It's like I wish I hadn't made it, because now I wouldn't have to be dealing with this.
Why am I the only one out of 15 people
Right.
managed to live through it?
Right. And why did I do what I did?
Yeah.
And was that the best? And so sorting it out can be difficult. This is why we need to be fearless, because we're going to have to face the demons. We're going to have to face, but we also come into it with the God of love. We come into it with compassion for ourselves, and we need to be it's by the grace of God that we have the life that we do today. We have to be able to give grace to our former selves in those moments. And so there's a tendency to instead of thinking in those complex terms, just to think about life in black and whites. There's one morality, there's one law, there's one set of standards, there's one set of expectations, and it goes throughout time and in all circumstances. And there's a difficulty in that. I think there is kind of a standardized morality for life, But again, we have to look more closely to interpret it in the right sense. I mean, that's why we have, that's why we create a process, a due process in our judicial system, because every context is going to be, you know, kind of unique.
Can you talk to some of these veterans and understand what their problems are?
I mean, I think we're limited in that if we have not experienced it for ourselves.
Yeah.
It's like, I think the people that would be able to understand them.
I have been married to 2 veterans during the war. And one of the things is they feel guilt, a lot of them. They've killed people, okay? And the other thing is they don't want to talk about it. You find most veterans would rather not talk about it.
Right.
So those are the things that apply to, you know, the lying or the feeling that they have inside and what they're going through.
Right. So there can be a case made that doing something like this, where we do a moral inventory of ourselves, if we're going to dig deeper, a lot of people choose not to do that. And the reasons why people choose not to do that is that it's too much.
Yeah.
To go back and tell ourselves the stories again, to remember things that have happened, to remember what we did and said or what other people did and said, it's just too much to dig into that. And there's a sense that you've gotten to a place where you find how precious life is. Why would I want to spend the years that I have left digging up and sorting through the past?
Yeah.
So each person is going to have to make that determination on their own as to how deeply they'll dig into that, because it can seem at times when we're digging up through the past that there's no benefit to it. It seems more like, you know, life is hard enough as it is under normal circumstances. Let's not make it worse. What you have to be aware of, and this is the tricky part, what you have to be aware of is those circumstances are already impacting you in some way. And if you are trying to make some changes in your current ways of thinking and behaving, and you find yourself getting stuck, it might be because you need to dig a little. Some people may say, you know, life right now for me is not bad, and I'm not going to complain, so I'm not going to dig. And that's fine. I mean, I think that's fine. I mean, there's no, if you're, unless you're just completely fooling yourself, unless you think life's fine, but everybody around you is telling you, you're a little cuckoo, or like you're really hurting everybody around you, then that might be a
lot
problem.
of the veterans groups, my dad would never join one. He was in World War II, but he would never join one. But with a lot of the veterans groups, they loved talking about their experiences during the war, what they did. Then you get the other ones, like my dad. He didn't talk about any of his experiences in World War II until he was
29.
Oh no, honey, he was well, he went in when he was 27, but he didn't talk about it until he was 80, 81, 82.
Yeah,
And then it was almost like pulling teeth.
yeah,
I knew a lot from my mother, so I could get him to talk about somebody. He just, no.
right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was just gonna say, I think too, I believe the 12 steps will help anybody, but especially like for, you know, the disease of alcoholism, addiction, gambling, whatever. I think that we don't get to a point where we even begin to look at the 12 steps or know anything about them until we get to a point that everything we've tried isn't working. Our lives are not working. Our lives are totally unmanageable and dysfunctional, and it's not just affecting us, which in the beginning, I think a lot of times we think it doesn't hurt anybody else, but it's a disease of, affects everybody else. And some people never get to that point, but it's like when you're really desperate. And it's a gift of desperation. I think you hit a point where nothing is working, I've got to do something. I don't believe this is going to work, but I also think it's something that works because of other people. We don't do it alone. To try and I'm going to sit down and do this all by myself.
Right.
Would be really hard. But what you said, it's about trusting somebody.
Mhm.
And it's a process,
Mhm.
and the steps are in order for a reason,
Right.
You have to get them right before you can go on to the next one, or the best that you can.
Yeah, this 12 steps were created for a group setting.
Yeah.
And in it, depending on how comfortable you are, it may be a smaller group, it may be a larger group. Yeah. We also have to remember too, this is step 4. This is not the end. So we're not recommending that you go dig up all this stuff and then that's it. That's because there's no intrinsic benefit to just digging up the past for the sake of digging up the past. That's not the goal. The goal is to be able to almost like re-experience the past in light of your new understandings, your new relationships, your healthier position, and then you can look at the past in a different way. You can resolve the past in some sense. You can let go of the past in some ways, because sometimes it's kind of funny. We will keep things buried, but we insist on keeping them.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? So sometimes we will dig something up and then let it go, and we're not burying it. You see the difference? Because with the other one, if we're burying it, it's like we keep it around. Even though it's not presently alive and affecting us, we're keeping the memory, and it is impacting us in some way. It's almost, if you think about it, it's almost like, since we're using the war analogy, you get shot with a bullet and you're like insist on keeping the bullet.
Yeah.
I don't want to dig it out. It's going to hurt. It's going to hurt if I dig it out. Well, some people have kept, bullets or shrapnel in their bodies for the rest of their lives, and there's no infection or anything like that, but they're carrying it with them. So it's almost, there's an analogy there of sometimes we insist on carrying these things around, and it may not be necessary. And you may find freedom by letting something go, and you may find you're able to move through life and enjoy life in a way that you couldn't if you didn't dig.
It's like somebody that went through something in their childhood and they talk about it and they say, oh, but I resolved it. I'm done with it. But they keep talking about it.
Right.
No, you're not.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting how we keep things alive? We keep people alive. We keep situations alive. We keep coming back to them. It's like we want to, like the movie Groundhog Day. It's like we insist on having this event memorialized and repeated over and over and over again for some weird reason. So digging, we're hoping we can figure out how to
It's like
do
with
it better.
Groundhog Day, where him reliving every day, he changed things. Whereas like a person who is holding on to something, they're trying to think, well, if I hold on to this, maybe I can get a different result.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not necessarily.
Right. All right. Let's go down to the next paragraph. In other words, the goal is actually not the perfect avoidance of all sin, which is not possible anyway, but the struggle itself and the encounter and wisdom that comes from it. Law and failure create a foil, which creates the conflict, which leads to a different kind of victory than any of us expect. Not perfect moral victory, not moral superiority, but just luminosity of awareness and compassion for the world, which becomes our real moral victory. All right, so when we're looking at morality, when we're looking at standards, the way things should be, the right way to think and act and do, it's good for us to have these ideals. It's good for us to have the example of Jesus and Jesus' teaching, right? This is kind of a moral standard that we're called to try to integrate into our lives in some way. But what we're going to find is that when we make the decision to be a moral person, we will struggle. And the reason we will struggle is that the morality that is revealed in Jesus or in these written moral codes, this high ideal, what it's going to reveal is how we are falling short, but then it's going to help us to make changes to live better. That's the goal. It's not supposed to, morality is not supposed to be viewed in a way that's like, here's perfection, see what you can do with it, and then it just keeps hitting you upside the head, and you just never get there. And eventually you might say to yourself, why am I even trying? Why am I even trying? I'm just going to give up. Screw morality. I'm going to do whatever I want. You know? I mean, a lot of people, that's what a lot of people do.
Yeah.
A lot of people do that. There's this really simple thing of, somebody told me that they would love me if I were like this. So I tried to be like this. And then they didn't love me. But I'm going to try to be like this so that they will love me. So there's this, some of that is, it may not be love, it may be a sense of value. Somebody told me this, that I am a valuable person. They're proud of me if I do this. And I tried, and then I failed. And eventually I did it so many times that I'm like, well, forget it. I'm not going to try to be made proud of. I'm not going to try to be loved. And so many of us can go through life and say, like, I don't want approval. I don't want to be better. I don't want anybody to love me. You know, I don't give a flying care in the world what people think of me. And in essence, when we say that and do that, we're denying a human part of us that needs love and that needs purpose and achievement and to be, to do something that people are proud of us about. So when we deny that, we put ourselves into a way of living that's not natural. But then within this rebelliousness of, I don't care, I'm going to do whatever I want, and forget everybody, along the way a person may or may not realize that they are damaging themselves and damaging people around them, and there might be some joys or freedoms in doing whatever you want, and you may go after some you may try to do some things that give you a high, that make you feel great, that make you feel good, but along the way you realize, like, that was fleeting, and if I keep doing that, I have to acknowledge that's not working out either. So it's almost like if we come to the realization that, guess what, it's going to be a struggle either way, but don't give up on kind of doing the right thing. People that tell you have to be perfect in order to be in a relationship with them, if you don't have to, don't be in a relationship with people like that, because they don't get it and they're not going to help. But there is a struggle. We are going to mess up and fall down, but it's better for us to look at it as, this is part of the growth process. All right? It's like you're constantly trying to get rid of the stupidity in your life. Little by little. That's how we get smarter, is we kind of get rid of stupidity. And the way that we do that is we go through a situation and we find out, oh, that's what it means to be stupid. Let me not do that again, right? And we kind of learn as we grow. So that's a struggle. If you do something and you realize how stupid it was, you failed. But at the same time, you can come out of that a smarter person than you went in. So actually, you kind of needed that to get to the other side. So I think because we have this negative connotation with the struggle, so much so maybe that we just want to give up. There is a way to embrace the struggle that can bring us freedom and enjoyment. There actually is part of us as humans that enjoy challenges, right? I mean, even the challenge of sitting there at a slot machine, it's like there's something about the challenge of it that's like, well, if I can just sit here just a little bit longer, maybe that's a simple one. But there are little challenges in life that we actually get satisfaction out of. We're kind of wired that way. I mean, if you look at the natural world, it's plenty of struggle going on there, you know, animals against animals and plants and everything in some ways is there's a lot of challenge, which we all challenge each other in some
The hard part
ways.
is you're not working on one thing at a time. You hit. Oh.
Yep, on many fronts, many challenges. It's hard to prioritize which ones to address first. So I guess part of this is accepting the challenging nature of life as being something that's okay. And if we do have the God of love with us and trust and a God that encourages us to grow, then yeah, that's a good thing. We may need, along the way, to give up, but giving up is a step in the process. Even death, if you think about it, the way that we envision or the way that we get meaning for death in Christianity is we say it's not the end. Giving up to death is not the end. But even that is a step to what's next. So that's our way of kind of taking the positivity of challenge to the nth degree and saying even the challenge of death can be something that if we embrace it, we will experience something better. So there are little kind of like Jesus says that we have to take up our cross. You have to deny yourselves and take up your cross, right? I didn't want to hear that. Why are you telling me that? You know, I'm sure that the disciples probably thought that, and I keep thinking that. I can see the benefit of it, but then I also am like, well, but I don't want to. So there seems to be in our life, there our final cross, you know, that of facing death maybe. But then along the path are all these other mini crosses, which at the time might feel like the final cross. You know, there's some kind of a challenge that we face in life, and what we have to realize is that to do the right thing in facing this, I am going to have to give up in a sense. I'm going to have to say I can't do it. Yet at the same time, I have to face the struggle of that as well. So there's this relationship between giving up and struggling that is an interesting one. It's like
Sometimes it's harder to give up than it is the actual struggle.
right. If you've been fighting all along,
Kind of gets to be a way of life.
yeah.
Yeah.
But surrender can be a step in the struggle, I guess we could say. All right, let's continue on. We must try to make it easier for others to love us. I'm sure I needed that advice. People who are more transparent at admitting of their blind spots and personality flaws are actually quite easy to love and be with. It doesn't take long for that to sink in, to feel like, well, that's pretty true.
Yeah.
If you've been around somebody that doesn't want to admit that they're wrong, we were just talking about this before we started. People that the people that admit their shortcomings, their blind spots, their personality flaws, there's an attraction to people like that. And it doesn't mean, it's not saying that these are people that are always down on themselves or pessimistic. That's different. People can look at their flaws as more like a way of getting pity, right? And so it's like, if I can get attention by getting pity, I'll take pity over love. Love is where you admit your faults, but then you're asking for something positive and you're wanting to become a better person. And there takes great vulnerability and trust to do that. People want to be around that. But somebody who's like admitting their problems and they're down on themselves and they just want you to say, oh, you poor thing. And we can take that as an alternative to love, because maybe it's a little safer to do it that way. But we don't tend to want to be around people like that. Those kind of people, unless you have two people that are like that, they can form this perfect
The pity party.
this perfect echo chamber of like, I'm sorry for you, oh, and I'm sorry for you, and when I'm sorry for you, well, I'm more sorry for you, well, I'm sorry for you too. You know, you and then what happens is every time you get together, you have to bring your story about how pitiful I am and how life just beat me up again, and they're like, oh yeah, well, life beat me up even more, can you believe it? And anyway, so
You should see what happened to me yesterday.
that would be that's not what we're talking about when we say people that share their flaws. This is a person who can share their flaws. Oftentimes can be a very lighthearted and funny person to be around. If you notice, the people that can laugh at themselves and make fun of themselves tend to be people that we want to hang around, because we'll say, well, I want to laugh at myself too, because I'm crying at myself right now. I would rather laugh at myself. What is the secret? And so we can find that in them. So, yes. So again, we're being encouraged that this idea of looking at flaws, though it is challenging, actually can be something that we can engage in that will make our lives better, that will actually free us in some way. And we do that with other people. That's kind of this purpose as we're going into this moral inventory. It may feel a little lonely at the time because you need the focus and to really look within. But as Patty with her spoiler said, like, this is not the end. We're actually this is a tool we're gonna be using later on. But don't overthink that when you're doing the inventory, just because you don't want to hold back when you're doing it. All right, your shadow. We talked about shadow just a bit last time. Your shadow self is not your evil self. It is just that part of you that you do not want to see, your unacceptable self by reason of nature, nurture, and choice, your shadow self. So some of what we're looking at when we're doing a moral inventory is we may find in the shadows we have done and said certain things that we try to forget about, right? And when we're looking at the shadow, what we're actually looking at is the person behind those decisions. So not only are we looking at what we did and said, we don't stop there, but we look at, why did I say that? What part of me would want to do that? Because there's something, like, we're not crazy. We do have real motivators to do and say what we do. At the time, we don't try to make stupid decisions. We try to make intelligent decisions. So we may find we actually did something that we look back on and we're ashamed of, or we wish we hadn't done. But at the time, it probably kind of seemed like a smart thing to do. And it seemed like maybe it was going to get you what you needed at the time. There was a motivation to get to a better place. So digging behind the shadow of that, we may say, maybe it wasn't me trying to take advantage of people when I did and said something, but actually it was a part of me that wanted the approval of people that did it. And I don't like to admit it, but there is part of me that wants people to like me. And I try not to bring that up and be vulnerable and honest about it, but in the shadows, a part of me lives that really, really does want people to like me. There's different, when we're looking at the shadow, we're looking at this part of us that is probably not a monster. We might be afraid that we're going to find a monster in there. This evil thing that's just selfish and trying to get. No, behind the selfishness usually is some kind of brokenness or some kind of vulnerability, and we're trying to deal with that brokenness and vulnerability the best way we know, and then we end up facing it or trying to deal with it or dealing with it in a way that really isn't ultimately good for us or the people around us. So that we're trying to look at that person in this inventory. And again, it is the line here is your unacceptable self by reason of nature, nurture, and choice. And so what that means is there are some things about us that naturally happened. Whether we want to call it DNA or the personality that we received from our parents or grandparents. There's this thing that we're born with, right? And so there's a shadow part that might have come naturally. There's another part that may have come through nurture, through our environment. We were raised certain ways. We had certain things around us. And in order to adapt to that environment, I became this person that now is in my shadow because I don't want to acknowledge that person that I was at the time. And then along the way also is the person of choice. And that's like, well, I just made some bad decisions. They were just bad. It wasn't, I can't say it was, it's just who I am or the environment I grew up in. It's like I knew better and I did it anyway. Right? So there's those three things that can play a role, and sometimes it's more one than the other. All right, ongoing shadowboxing. So ongoing shadowboxing is absolutely necessary. The word ongoing is not encouraging, is it? This is kind of like there always will be struggle. Welcome to life. So ongoing shadowboxing is necessary because we all have well-denied shadow selves. We all have that which we cannot see, we will not see, and we dare not see. It would destroy our public and personal self-image. The more you are attached to any persona, like the stage mask in Greek, the more you're attached to that mask that you present, whatsoever good or bad, any chosen or preferred self-image, the more shadow self you will have. Right? The more you're attached to the mask, the more the shadow is building up behind us. So we absolutely need conflicts, relationship difficulties, moral failures, defects in our grandiosity, even seeming enemies, or we'll have no way to ever spot or track our own shadow self. They are our necessary mirrors. So I bring up the parable. I just wrote about it in my class this week. The parable of the speck and the log. And this is the mirror. It's a mirror, and it's like a magnification mirror in some ways, right? So when we see the speck in somebody's eye and we say, let me get that speck you have, let me fix this problem that you have. What we don't realize is that what we see, the little thing that we see in somebody else, we have a log or a plank or a moat, whatever the English translation is. We have a log in our own eye. Same stuff, a little piece of wood, we got a big piece of wood. But we don't. The silly thing is, and I saw there's a painting of this. I think in Wikipedia they have paintings sometimes. So if you look up that text or parable, it's like this big church, and there's like a priest with the fancy priest clothes on, and he has this plank that's like going all the way up like 3 stories high, and he's looking in the face of another person. And it's silly, but it's this truth that Jesus is speaking, and it is a tool for us. So when we see a speck, one of the things that we should say is, there's some shadow in me that I might need to pay some attention to. Now, I was bringing this up, a friend of mine is a clinical psychologist, and so we were hanging out. We went on this fishing trip together years ago, and it may have been on this trip that I brought this up, this whole, because I was really enjoying this kind of insight that I got about this story. I'm like, isn't it amazing when people trigger me, it's letting me know that there's some shadow stuff that I need to deal with. And he said back to me like, or the person is just a jerk. I'm like, well, yeah, I have to acknowledge that, but I still held on to it that even if the guy's just being a jerk, it's not that I have the problem, the guy's just being a jerk. I still think in everything there's probably some benefit to examining that there might be something inside of it. So it's kind of like if you pay attention along the way to what grabs your attention. One way or the other, it could make you really mad. If you're finding yourself being more angry than you really should be in that situation, maybe looking close at that will help you to see that the shadow is trying to come alive, is trying to get out, is trying to manifest itself, and it's just manifesting as a temper tantrum, when in fact the shadow self might be something like this little girl or little boy that is abandoned and needs somebody to love and take care of them. And it's like it's turned into something else, So this idea here that life, we complain so much and say like, why did God make life so hard? Why is it not fair? Why is there evil in the world? And we say it as if God screwed up. And we say, well, we won't blame God. We'll blame ourselves. The reason why, that's our interpretation of Adam and Eve. It's like, well, God would have made a perfect place, but we screwed it up. And God didn't. God wanted something else, but we wanted this. I think there's a more complex way to look at it, maybe a more mature way to look at it, that it's possible that all of these challenges are here literally for our benefit. And it's
well, if you
it's
don't
a
have
trick.
a bad day, how can you appreciate a good day?
It's true. So if you want to have the best day ever, you have to prepare yourself for the worst day ever.
Yeah.
That kind of a thing. This just is some way to accept the challenges of life. Think about the ways some of our Christianity can help support us in doing this. Some of our Christianity can take us off in a different direction. And some of the ways that we can do that is we can say the reason for all the challenges is because of this sinful nature that happened a long time ago, and it's in the human DNA, and we're cursed with it, and there's nothing we can do about it. And on top of that, Satan is running around and kicking us while we're down. But Jesus came so that one day we can get out of this damn place and go into paradise. And then we don't have to think about it or deal with it anymore. End of story. So in that regard, you're thankful for your Savior that pulls you out of hell, essentially. In that interpretation, it's like we're created in hell and we're just being pulled out of it. The other way of looking at it is we're actually put into an environment where if we do things in a healthy and balanced way, these things will lead us into growth and into liberation and into a fuller sense of meaning and purpose. So there is value in this. And actually, if we want to get to a better place, the path or the tools are right in front of us already. We just may not see it because we're looking at all this as the problem instead of as the solution. That's a tricky way to view life. So it is a leaning into the struggle because we know that that's where life is. And it's not a fear of it. There's a respect for it. And it doesn't mean that life is only struggle, because there are some victories and celebrations and growth that goes along the way.
Wouldn't life kind of be like camping? They always say that when you camp that you should leave your campsite better than you found it.
Mm-hmm.
Through life, shouldn't you always try and leave yesterday, leave today better than you found it yesterday?
Right. And
Right.
in order to do that, you have to face struggle,
Yeah,
because it's a struggle to clean up after you set up.
yeah.
You know, it is challenging, but so
It's none of the fun stuff. It's none of the fun stuff of camping. It's cleaning up and packing up to go home. You know?
Right.
And the same thing with life. You want today to be better than yesterday, but in order to do that, you got some stuff from yesterday you need to take care of.
right.
Sometimes you don't have enough time to clean it all up.
We got things to do. Right. Yeah, I was in one of the readings that I had for this week. He was talking about. Let's see if I can keep my mind on track here. It was talking about time, and it was talking about how in our culture, time is money.
Yeah.
Is this reality, right? So the idea is try to do the most we can in the amount of time that we can. So you need to work harder, faster, because if you don't, you're losing money, essentially. So there is this thing of, behind that way in our society, there is this idea of perpetual profit, which just even with simple math doesn't seem to make any sense. It's like every year you need to make more money than you made last year. Now, if it's being offset by some kind of inflation or something, I guess I can get that. But to have more probably shouldn't be the goal. It should be, yes, I have struggle and I move forward, but there's always this idea of sufficiency and sustainability and that kind of thing. So we can go through life kind of frantically scrambling to get as much and do as much as we can in the time that we are allotted. But what we have to realize is you have to go through thoroughly and completely in order to really experience a total complete benefit. It's almost like I guess if you're doing complex math equations, you probably don't want to rush. You know, you probably want to take your time. If you're going to write something and put it out there for the world to read, you probably want to take time and choose your words carefully. And but anyway, yes, there is the need to move forward and not get stuck. Analysis is paralysis. Right. All right. Let's see if we. Okay, let's end with this because I already brought it up. Why do you observe the splinter in your brother's eye and never notice the plank in your own eye? How dare you say to your sister, let me take the splinter out of your eye, when all the time there's a log in your own eye. Take out the log of your own eye first, and then you will see clearly enough to take the splinter out of your brother or sister's eye. That's Matthew 7. Step 4 is about seeing your own log first, so you can stop blaming, accusing, and denying, and thus displacing the problem. So that's the ultimate goal of this step. It's about seeing the log first, which may come through shadow work, shadow boxing. Notice as you're doing the inventory, kind of notice what's triggering you in life, what's setting you off, what's making me mad and sad, and things like that. Look deeply, see the way that we've acted and behaved, that we recognize I don't want to do that moving forward. But then also look a little bit deeper and say, who was behind that? Who really was behind that decision that I made? And maybe I need to give that person some attention and some love and some compassion. And that's the part of me that you want to bring with you, and you may want to present to your friends and your family, that part of you that we have been hiding away all along. And that's not easy. That's not easy.
Be careful how you bring it in the room.
Yeah, we may even look around at people that have been vulnerable and have backfired, and we may say, I'm not going to make that mistake. Don't you? If you think about kids, there is this spontaneity to them living, and it really does take effort against that spontaneity to kind of get them to stop being that way. And it's like I think that one of the goals, this is why Jesus talks about being like a child, I think, is probably in that there's this vulnerability, this spontaneity, this just wide-eyed engagement in life that's not overthinking things and not trying to avoid all the potholes, but it's just going for it. There's some of that we need to keep. Now, yes, we're wise, but don't be like wise and cranky and somebody nobody wants to be around. You know what I mean? So we're trying to be wise yet playful. And that's that is probably an indication that we have integrated our shadow, because it's usually in the shadows where we have that the little kid part of us that is vulnerable and has big dreams and is just wants to have fun and stuff like that. It's when we have that part of us denied or put into some kind of a restriction or told that we shouldn't be that way, then that little person has to go into hiding, and they'll stay in the shadows until we can kind of let them come out. So that's what 4 is trying to help us do. All right. Send us out in the power of your Spirit, Lord. May our lives bring Jesus to